War. War never changes.
You some kind of war junkie?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Welcome to the War 102 podcast, where we explore the doctrine, theory, philosophy, and history of warfare. I'm your guide, Paul Darling, and I want to share what I learned in nearly 30 years in uniform. So let's get to learning about the most influential activity in human history, war. Welcome to episode 113, Simon Bolivar Strikes Back. By the close of 1815, the Spanish Empire appeared to have regained control over northern South America. The collapse of the Second Venezuelan Republic had scattered the revolutionary movement, and many of its most experienced leaders were dead, imprisoned, or in exile. Royalist armies occupied the cities, while local militias loyal to the crown dominated the countryside. For Simon Bolivar, these reverses marked certainly the lowest point of the independence struggle. Yet the years that followed demonstrated his greatest strength as a military leader, the ability to transform these seeming defeats into a strategic opportunity. Rather than attempting to recreate the revolutionary armies that had failed between 1810 and 1815, Bolivar fundamentally rethought his approach to warfare. He recognized that success would require more than courageous soldiers or inspiring rhetoric. Victory depended upon building an army capable of sustained operations across immense distances, integrating disparate regional forces into a unified command, and choosing campaigns that struck at the enemy's strategic center rather than merely reclaiming lost territory. Between 1816 and 1821, Bolivar evolved from an able revolutionary commander into one of the century's most foremost practitioners of operational warfare. Exiled first in British Jamaica and later in formerly French Haiti, Bolivar devoted considerable attention to assessing the causes of his previous failures. During this period, he refined his understanding of the relationship between military force and political legitimacy. He concluded that independence could not be achieved solely through the leadership of Creole elites. The revolutionary cause had to appeal to a broader population, including Africans, free people of mixed ancestry, indigenous communities, and, most importantly, the mounted llaneros of Venezuela's interior. Support from Haiti proved indispensable. President Alexandre Pétion provided Bolivar with ships, weapons, ammunition, and volunteers, asking in return only that the revolutionary movement abolish slavery wherever it succeeded. Pétion understood that the survival of independent Haiti depended upon weakening European colonial power throughout the Caribbean basin. For Bolivar, Haitian assistance proved the material foundation necessary to resume military operations, while also reinforcing the political necessity of expanding the revolution beyond the interests of the colonial elite. Bolivar landed on the Venezuelan coast in 1816 with a small expeditionary force, and militarily these early operations achieved limited success. However, they served a larger strategic purpose by reestablishing the revolutionary presence inside Venezuela and demonstrating that the struggle had not ended. Rather than risking his limited resources in decisive engagements against superior royalist forces, Bolivar concentrated on preserving the nucleus of a professional army capable of gradual expansion. This represented a significant departure from his earlier campaigns. During the First and Second Republics, revolutionary leaders often sought rapid liberation of major cities in hopes that political victory would follow military success, but experience had demonstrated the limitations of this approach. Urban centers could be captured relatively quickly, but maintaining control proved impossible without secure communications, reliable logistics, and sustained support in the surrounding countryside. Bolivar increasingly viewed territory not as an objective in itself, but merely as a means of sustaining his military operations. The destruction of enemy field armies became more important than symbolic occupation of political capitals. You will note this nod to the Clausewitz supreme objective. This shift reflected an emerging appreciation for operational depth. Instead of fighting for every town, Bolivar sought to preserve his army's freedom of movement while gradually exhausting the enemy's ability to respond. Perhaps the most important development during this period was the gradual incorporation of the llaneros into the revolutionary cause. Earlier in the war, these highly skilled horsemen had largely supported royalist commanders, such as José Tomás Boves. Their mastery of cavalry tactics, intimate knowledge of the plains, and remarkable endurance had repeatedly overwhelmed Republican armies organized according to European military traditions. The death of Boves in 1814 altered the political landscape, but did not automatically shift llanero loyalties. Winning their support required more than military victories. and Bolivar increasingly recognized that political reconciliation and social inclusion were strategic necessities rather than mere ideological preferences. The emergence of José Antonio Páez proved decisive. Páez possessed qualities that Bolivar lacked. A native of the Llanos, he understood the customs, leadership structures, and fighting methods of the plainsmen. Unlike many revolutionary officers drawn from urban aristocratic backgrounds, Páez enjoyed the personal loyalty of his cavalry through shared experience and demonstrated competence. Rather than viewing Páez as a rival, Bolivar displayed one of his greatest strengths as a commander, the willingness to delegate authority to exceptionally capable subordinates. He recognized that effective coalition warfare required accommodating regional leaders while maintaining unity of strategic direction. Páez retained considerable autonomy in organizing and leading the Llanero cavalry, but his operations increasingly served Bolivar's broader strategic objectives. The Llaneros transformed the military balance in northern South Africa. Their cavalry possessed extraordinary operational mobility. Individual horsemen often traveled distances that European-based commanders considered impossible, carrying minimal supplies and living off the land. They excelled at reconnaissance, raiding, and rapid concentration against isolated enemy detachments. Bolivar adapted his own methods to exploit these capabilities. Infantry remained essential for holding key positions and conducting conventional engagements, but cavalry increasingly became the instrument through which he achieved operational surprise. Rather than treating mounted troops as supporting arms, Bolivar integrated them into campaigns as equal partners with infantry and artillery, and often the main effort of his strategy. This integration reflected his growing appreciation for combined arms operations, but adapted to South American conditions. European military doctrine emphasized carefully ordered formations and battlefield positions, and Bolivar retained these principles where appropriate, but subordinated them to mobility and flexibilities. His armies became capable of operations across environments ranging from the flooded plains to tropical forests and high mountain passes. By 1817, Bolivar had established a relatively secure base in the Orinoco River Basin. The city of Angostura served as both political headquarters and logistic center. Control of this region proved several strategic advantages. It allowed access to river transportation, facilitated communication with foreign supporters, and placed revolutionary forces beyond the immediate reach of concentrated royalist offensives. Bolivar devoted considerable attention to institutional development. He organized supply systems, standardized military administration, and sought greater discipline within the army. Although shortages remained constant, these reforms gradually transformed revolutionary forces from a loosely organized militia into a more professional military establishment. Logistics occupied an increasingly central place in Bolivar's strategic thinking. Previous campaigns had demonstrated that armies unable to sustain themselves eventually dissolved, regardless of battlefield performance. Food, ammunition, horses, clothing, and medical support became essential components of his operational planning. Bolivar understood that every campaign represented not merely a sequence of battles, but a complex system of movement, supply, recruitment, and communications. This broader conception of warfare distinguished him from many contemporaries. He increasingly viewed military operations through what modern analysts would recognize as the operational art, connecting tactical engagements to strategic objectives through sustained campaigning. The opportunity to apply these principles emerged in 1819. At first glance, Venezuela appeared the obvious objective for renewed offensive operations. Royalist forces remained concentrated there, and liberation of Caracas held immense symbolic value. Bolivar instead chose a far more ambitious and unexpected strategy. Rather than attacking the strongest Spanish concentrations directly, he proposed invading New Granada by crossing the eastern Andes during the rainy season. The plan astonished many of his own officers. The proposed route traversed flooded plains followed by mountain passes rising well above 12,000 feet, and few believed that a whole army could survive such conditions intact, much less emerge capable of defeating experienced royalist forces. Precisely because the operation appeared impossible, Bolivar recognized its strategic value. Operational surprise rests not merely upon secrecy, but upon convincing the enemy that certain actions simply cannot occur. Spanish commanders anticipated renewed campaigns within Venezuela. They did not expect a major army to appear suddenly in the highlands of New Granada after traversing terrain considered nearly impassable. The campaign began in May of 1819. Bolivar assembled approximately 2,500 men drawn from diverse backgrounds: Venezuelans, New Granadans, British, Irish volunteers, and Llanero cavalry. Maintaining cohesion among such varied forces required careful leadership. Differences in language, culture, and military experience might easily have undermined operational effectiveness. The first phase involved crossing the flooded llanos. Seasonal rains had transformed the plains into enormous marshlands. Soldiers marched through water for days at a time while livestock struggled to survive. Supplies deteriorated rapidly. Disease spread throughout the columns. Yet the hardship also served an unintended purpose. Royalist intelligence regarded the flooded plains as impassable, and therefore paid relatively little attention to revolutionary movements within them. Having crossed the flooded plains, Bolivar confronted the greatest obstacle of the campaign, the Andes themselves. The ascent towards Paramo de Pisba subjected troops accustomed to tropical climates now to freezing temperatures, high altitude, and snow. The horses died in large numbers, and many soldiers lacked adequate clothing. Food became increasingly scarce. The physical losses were severe. Numerous soldiers perished from exposure and exhaustion before any battle occurred. Yet Bolivar accepted these sacrifices because he understood the strategic payoff. If even a portion of the army reached New Granada intact, it would achieve complete operational surprise. Leadership during the crossing required extraordinary personal example. Bolivar shared the hardship of his soldiers, reinforcing morale despite deteriorating conditions. His presence at critical moments sustained confidence among commanders who might otherwise would have abandoned the expedition. Emerging from the mountains in July of 1819, reminder, the depths of winter in South America, Bolivar's army encountered dispersed royalist forces that had not anticipated its arrival. Spanish commanders initially underestimated the threat, believing the revolutionary army too weakened to undertake offensive action. Bolivar exploited this hesitation by maintaining a relentless operational tempo. Rather than pausing to rebuild strength, he advanced immediately, forcing the enemy into successive engagements before reinforcements could concentrate. This reflected one of Bolivar's enduring operational principles. Momentum itself constituted a form of combat power. Every day that revolutionary forces maintained the initiative increased the confusion within Spanish command structures. The Battle of Vargas Swamp on July 25th illustrated the principle. Although tactically indecisive, the engagement prevented Royalist forces from halting Bolivar's advance. And more importantly, it preserved the operational initiative that the Andes crossing had created. Bolivar refused to become fixated on tactical outcomes alone. His objective remained strategic. Every engagement was evaluated according to whether it advanced the broader campaign, rather than whether it produced immediate battlefield destruction. The decisive encounter occurred on August 7, 1819, at the Battle of Boyaca. The battle itself was relatively modest in scale, but its operational significance was immense. Bolivar recognized that the Spanish army's movement towards Bogota created vulnerabilities during river crossings and road junctions. By maneuvering aggressively, revolutionary forces intercepted the Royalists before they could unite with additional reinforcements. Coordination among Bolivar's subordinate commanders proved exemplary. Infantry fixed the enemy in place, while cavalry exploited opportunities to disrupt Spanish formations and sever communications between advance and rear elements. Rather than launching repeated frontal assaults, Bolivar emphasized maneuver, isolation, and sequential defeat of enemy components. The battle lasted but a few hours, yet its consequences reshaped northern South America. Most of the Spanish field army surrendered. The road to Bogota lay open. The viceroy fled the capital, leaving behind substantial financial resources, military supplies, and administrative infrastructure. From a strategic perspective, Boyaca achieved results far exceeding those of a conventional battlefield victory. By capturing New Granada almost intact, Bolivar secured the economic foundation necessary for continued military operations throughout the continent. The resources of modern-day Colombia provided manpower, revenue, arms, and legitimacy that earlier revolutionary governments had lacked. And the campaign is widely regarded as one of history's greatest examples of the operational art. Bolivar identified the enemy's strategic center of gravity, accepted a great deal of calculated risk by traversing seemingly impassable terrain, achieved complete operational surprise, maintained his momentum, and translated these tactical successes into a strategic advantage. Perhaps more importantly, the campaign demonstrated Bolivar's mature understanding of the indirect strategy. Rather than attacking the strongest enemy concentrations where they expected him, he struck where they were weakness. Geography itself became his weapon. Terrain that others viewed as an obstacle became the means through which surprise was achieved. Following Boyaca, Bolivar focused on consolidating political as well as military gains. The establishment of Gran Colombia united Venezuela and New Granada within a single republican state, providing the institutional framework for future campaigns. Once again, the military victory served political objectives rather than replacing them. The years between 1816 and 1821 therefore marked the decisive transformation of Bolivar's military career. He emerged from exile, having rebuilt not merely an army, but an entire system of strategies. His integration of political coalition building, operational mobility, logistical planning, combined arms tactics, and indirect maneuver produced one of the most remarkable campaigns of the 19th century. Yet the liberation of northern South America represented only part of Bolivar's largest vision. Spanish power remained entrenched in Ecuador and Peru, where the strongest royalist armies on the continent continued to resist independence. The campaigns ahead would require even greater coordination among Allied commanders, more complex logistical preparations, and operations across some of the most demanding terrain in the world. Having demonstrated mastery of the operational art in the liberation of New Granada, Bolivar would next seek to destroy the remaining centers of Spanish military power and complete the liberation of Spanish South America, which we will discuss, outside of any noteworthy new event, next week. Thanks for listening today. If you want to help the show, please share today's episode on any social media sites you can. Check out the War 102 Buzzsprout website for more information and to send me a message. And, of course, my thanks to the subscribers who help keep the show going. Hope you all join me next week. See you soon.